At 06:03 hours at Kacha airfield, the crew of this Russian Ka-27M helicopter sat on standby while 24 Ukrainian drones slammed into Sevastopol harbor to the south. They knew the routine. When the attack ended, they'd sweep for naval drones that tried to sneak in. Same route every time. Completely unaware that a 25th drone was already headed toward that exact corridor, low and quiet, with a very different mission. The first Russian Zu-23 gunner acquired a target at 1,400 meters, a dark shape crossing his sight picture against the early morning sky. He pressed both triggers. The twin barrels hammered and the first burst went left. He corrected 2 mils right. At that range, a shift of about 2.8 meters, and fired again. Tracers converged on the airframe. A 23mm round punches through light armor. The drone might as well be made of cardboard. The fuel tank ruptured on the second hit, and the airframe came apart in a bright orange flash that lit up 3 blocks of rooftops. Across the gun belt, 5 other trucks engaged simultaneously, each gunner squinting through a reflex sight, walking rounds into targets the old-fashioned way. No radar lock, no computer-assisted lead, just 2,000 rounds per minute of cyclic fire and barrels that overheat in 90 seconds of sustained shooting. It's the anti-aircraft equivalent of fighting a wasp with a garden hose. You point it in the general direction and hope volume solves the accuracy problem. A second drone crossed the first gunner's sector before the smoke cleared. He swung the mount, reacquired, pressed the triggers. The tracers went wide. Every 5th round in the belt is tipped with phosphorus that burns bright enough to see in daylight. Same idea as firing a paintball gun at night with glow-in-the-dark paintballs. You follow the ones you can see to figure out where all the ones you can't see are landing. His glowing rounds were curving left as the barrels heated and the metal expanded. He corrected, fired again. The rounds clipped the wing root and the drone tumbled, trailing fire, into an empty parking lot 400 meters short of the harbor. His loader was already dragging fresh ammunition cans from a supply truck parked behind a retaining wall. At this rate, they'd burn through their entire loadout in under 5 minutes. 2 trucks down the line, another gunner ran dry mid-engagement, the barrels spinning on empty while a drone sailed through his sector untouched. It caught a Verba missile 40 seconds later, but 40 seconds is a long time when things are exploding. 50 kilometers south of the gun belt, while those tracers were still arcing over Sevastopol, a 25th drone held a different course entirely. An FP-2 drone you see here threaded along a valley floor at 10 meters altitude, low enough its gray composite frame blended with terrain in every direction. The Zu-23 is a visual engagement weapon. Gunners need contrast, a drone shape against sky. The FP-2 never gave them sky. It flew beneath the horizon line of every side in the belt, ground behind it from every angle, invisible to gunners who were looking up at things that were trying to get past them. This one wasn't trying to get past anything. It was going somewhere else. Out in the harbor, a Project 22160 patrol ship launched its first Tor missile at just under 8 kilometers. Russia had bolted a land-based surface-to-air system onto the ship's helicopter deck. They literally ripped out the landing pad and welded on a launcher, because after 3 years of Ukrainian drone warfare, they needed missiles more than a place to park the helicopter. That's not improvisation, that's desperation with extra steps. The Tor's radar painted the lead drone, computed a firing solution, and launched. The missile tracked clean. The target became scrap metal tumbling into the Black Sea, and the radar was already painting the next one before the first hit the water. Second missile, another intercept. A third drone tried threading the wave tops at 12 meters altitude, the lowest approach it could manage without clipping swells. The Tor tracked it all the way down and caught it 300 meters from the hull. A fourth drone came in high and fast on a direct heading for the ship. The launcher swiveled, acquired, fired. Intercept at 600 meters. Debris splashed into the harbor close enough to rattle the bridge windows. Meanwhile, the lone FP-2 was 6 kilometers east when those missiles launched, cruising through a shallow draw with terrain between its airframe and the Tor's phased array. That radar is optimized for threats approaching from altitude. Beam angles biased upward because that's where the drones come from. A target below the radar horizon, cross-section smaller than most of the rocks on the hillside above it, registers as ground clutter. The system filters it out automatically, the way your brain stops registering your wife's weekend to-do list. Mow the lawn, fix the shelf, clean the gutters. After a while, it all just becomes background noise. The Tor was scanning a sky full of 24 threats, and the FP-2 was somewhere between clean the gutters and organize the garage, heard, ignored, and about to cause a serious problem. Here's where things get interesting. The Panzer S-1, radar-guided autocannons, missiles, the one system purpose-built to eat drones, was designed to watch exactly the angles the Tor misses. Low, slow, terrain-hugging. That's Panzer's territory. But the Panzer that had been guarding this corridor was gone. Ukraine destroyed it 2 nights earlier, right here at Kacha. So the gap the FP-2 was flying through wasn't luck. It was a hole Ukraine had cut open 48 hours ago, and they knew exactly how wide it was. Back in Sevastopol, on the rooftops, Russian MANPADS teams shouldered their Verba launchers you see here, Russia's most advanced shoulder-fired missile. The seeker cross-references infrared, ultraviolet, and near-infrared before it commits, which makes it far harder to fool than the older Igla. Trying to spoof a Verba with a standard decoy is like trying to trick a polygraph by only controlling your heart rate. The other channels catch the lie. Against a drone with a hot gasoline engine backlit against open sky, every channel agreed immediately. The first gunner acquired tone and fired. The missile caught a drone at 1,100 meters, and the warhead fragmented it into burning aluminum that rained across the residential courtyard. The second gunner engaged the next target. A third team wasted around on falling debris still radiating heat from a Zu-23 intercept. The sky was so full of burning fragments that the thermal picture had turned to noise. One Verba gunner paused. His scope had registered movement at ground level, hugging terrain near the Bakhchasari district. He watched for 3 seconds. The contact didn't repeat. An animal. Heat shimmer. He went back to scanning the sky. The Verba needs a clean thermal signature against a consistent background to compute a lock solution. A cool motor and a compact airframe below 400 meters of range, hugging terrain that breaks the tracking consistency, to the Seeker software that reads identical to the dozens of false returns from burning debris scattered across the countryside. Behind all the shooters, electronic warfare systems had been flooding the spectrum for hours. Broadband jamming across the GPS bands, the standard control frequencies, the common data link channels, trying to sever the connection between every drone in the sky and its operator hundreds of kilometers away. 2 more drones lost guidance simultaneously, corkscrewing into empty fields east of the city. The EW operators logged both as suppressed. Then it found the lone FP-2. The drone operator's feed spiked with static. Latency jumped from stable to 300 milliseconds. Imagine trying to drive a car where the windshield shows you what was happening a third of a second ago. Every turn you make is already late. The image stuttered, froze, and the drone's heading began to drift as jamming chewed into the control link. For 3 seconds, the operator watched his aircraft start to sputter, the heading indicator wandering, the altitude readout flickering, the video feed dissolving into gray blocks. On a Russian EW screen somewhere in Sevastopol, another blip staggered, descending, signal degrading. The operator watching that screen had seen this 100 times. Another drone caught in the bubble. He logged it as suppressed and moved on. Checked a box. Probably poured more tea. He was half right. The signal was degrading. The blip was descending. Everything on his screen had said this drone was finished. But the aircraft behind that signal had an operator with his hand on the stick. He overrode the autopilot a half second before the jamming completed the job, took manual control and hand flew below the EW noise floor on the drone's narrow beam frequency hopping data link. Jamming that signal is like trying to drown a whispered phone call by turning up the stadium PA. The whisper is aimed at one ear with noise-canceling headphones, and your noise is aimed at everyone. You can make it harder, you can't make it impossible. The operator tightened his relay antenna into a narrower cone, concentrating signal strength. The screen went black for 2 full seconds. He held the stick steady, trusting the last heading, flying blind through the gap. The image came back, treetops filling the frame, terrain rushing up. He pulled the nose level at 40 meters. The link was degraded, latency sitting at 220 milliseconds, every input arriving at the drone a quarter second after his hand moved. Not clean, but flyable. It had to work. The FP-2 descended over a village called Kamyshly, throttled to near idle, settled into a loiter pattern. Kamyshly sits in the Bakhchasari district with nothing worth defending. No base, no radar, a village where nobody would think to look for anything. It sits directly underneath the flight path between Kacha airfield and the Sevastopol coastline. So the operator waited. Somewhere north, the swarm was still getting shredded. He could hear the radio chatter, the countdowns, but his job now was different. Hold the loiter, keep the motor just above stall speed, and watch the fuel gauge, because the FP-2 had burned most of its reserves on the long transit. If the helicopter didn't launch within 30 minutes, there would be nothing left to intercept it with. 20 minutes passed. The radar chatter from the swarm went quiet. The operator stared at the feed, the same road, the same rooftops, the same dark terrain he'd been watching since he arrived. Then a new voice on the frequency. Kacha was spinning up a helicopter. The operator checked his fuel readout, checked the wind, checked the approach angles he'd memorized during the loiter. Everything he could control was set. Everything he couldn't control was about to launch from a runway 17 kilometers north. The last drones were currently falling over the harbor, 24 intercepted. The defense had worked. Every Russian system engaged correctly, and nobody mentioned the one contact the EW operator had logged as suppressed 40 minutes earlier. It was now or never. The FP-2 had 10 minutes of fuel left. At Kacha airfield, the post-attack procedures kicked in, same as every time. After a drone swarm hits Sevastopol, the Black Sea Fleet sends up a Ka-27 helicopter to sweep the coast. Confirm no naval drones slip behind the chaos. Majura V-5 surface drones, Sea Baby unmanned boats, anything trying to use the aerial attack as cover for a run at the harbor approaches. The helicopter finds them, and the crews have gotten good at it. Door gunners lean out over the Black Sea and engage surface drones with direct machine gun fire from 200 meters. There's Russian published footage, tracers hosing the water while the pilot holds a low orbit. They fly the same corridors every time because the coastline doesn't change and neither do the approach routes. Its flight path took it directly over Kamyshly. The FP-2 operators saw it first as navigation lights, 2 points of light moving southwest against pre-dawn sky. Then the silhouette filled in, low, maybe 8 meters, following terrain toward the coast. The rhythmic percussion of coaxial rotors, 2 sets of blades spinning in opposite directions, which is how you spot a Kamyshly from the ground. Fast, exactly the corridor, exactly the timing. The operator did the math while the helicopter closed. The Ka-27M carries an FHA phased array radar under the fuselage you see here. 360-degree coverage across surface, air, and ground contacts. It has a door gunner with a PKT machine gun. The helicopter was originally designed to hunt submarines with torpedoes and dipping sonar at 500 meters depth, built to find things hiding under millions of tons of ocean. And Russia had repurposed it to chase Ukrainian surface drones. That's like hiring a deep-sea fishing captain to catch pigeons. He's overqualified, he's got the wrong equipment, and the pigeons know it. But the machine still carried the sensors, the radar, and the crew that had done this patrol before and knew how to use all of it. If they saw the FP-2 coming, the door gunner would end it. Every one of those sensors was aimed at the ocean ahead. Radar sweeping the sea approaches, gunners scanning the waterline, 3 men looking for what they always look for, surface threats coming off the water. The FP-2 was behind them, below them, over land, in the one place a submarine hunter never thinks to look. And it had been sitting there for 40 minutes waiting for exactly this helicopter to fly exactly this corridor. 2 kilometers. The operator could see the helicopter's shape growing in his degraded feed. He'd been staring at dark terrain for 40 minutes, and now the screen had purpose. 1,500 meters. The FP-2 sat low and quiet, the kind of radar return that disappears into ground clutter at any distance. The operator resisted the impulse to start the dive early. He couldn't risk getting in the gunner's envelope. 2 timers running low. The transit window, maybe 60 seconds where the geometry worked before the Ka-27M reached open water and the crew went active. Radar sweeping, gunner scanning. And the fuel gauge, which had been burning at idle since mid-attack and was somewhere between workable and faith. The operator had run the numbers 3 times during the loiter. Each time the margin got thinner. 1 kilometer now, rotor disc and fuselage visible through the feed. At 270 per hour, the helicopter would cross the engagement window in about 13 seconds. The door gunner was the problem. 1 glance backward, 2 seconds of eye contact with a shape climbing from terrain, and the PKT would shred the FP-2 before the operator could blink. The man in that door knew what a drone looked like. He engaged them before from that exact position. He was looking toward the water. 700 meters. The operator committed full throttle. Nothing happened. The motor coughed. a dry, rattling stutter that comes from a cold-soaked engine sitting at near idle in pre-dawn air for 40 minutes. The propeller jerked, caught, stuttered again. On the feed, the altitude readout held flat. The drone wasn't climbing. The operator watched the helicopter pull ahead, the geometry sliding out of alignment. Every second the motor didn't catch was a second the window compressed from 13 to 12 to 11. He held the throttle forward and waited for physics to decide whether 40 minutes of cold had wrecked the engine or just made it angry. The motor caught, the whine climbed, the propeller bit air, and the FP-2 surged forward. The window had shrunk from 13 seconds to maybe 9. Enough, barely. The drone climbed at a shallow angle toward the helicopter's flight path, from below and behind. Pilots faced forward, gunner covering the coastal flanks. Nobody aboard had ears for anything under the rotor wash. 2 sets of Kamyshly blades beating the air at a combined volume that masks everything below it. The drone came up from the dark land behind them. 500 meters. The operator could make out the fuselage and the bulge of the radar housing underneath. The helicopter was enormous in the feed now, the camera blooming at the edges with the sudden scale change. Then the helicopter banked. A hard turn to the right. The pilot had spotted something below. Debris from the swarm, a suspicious wake, a shadow that looked like a Majura. Didn't matter what. What mattered was that the door gunner's field of view swung from the forward coastal arc toward the FP-2's approach vector. For 2 full seconds, the gunner was looking in the direction of the drone. The operator froze the controls. Any moment, any change in the drone's profile against the terrain would catch the eye of a man trained to spot exactly this kind of threat. The FP-2 drifted on its last input, climbing slowly, exposed. The gunner didn't see it. The drone was below him, small, gray against the gray land, and his eyes were adjusting to the water below the helicopter's new heading. The pilot straightened out. Whatever he'd seen wasn't worth a second pass. The Ka-27 rolled level and resumed its southwest heading toward the coast. But the geometry had changed. The bank had shifted the helicopter 40 meters south of the original flight path and cost 3 seconds of the window. The intercept angle the operator had calculated during the loiter was wrong now. He adjusted on the fly. 2 degrees of correction through a feed still running 220 milliseconds behind reality, steering toward where the helicopter would be, not where the screen said it was. 300 meters. He could see the gunner now, a figure in the open door, his shoulders reoriented toward the coast. The man's head didn't move. 250. The rotor wash from above was starting to buffet the FP-2, turbulence shoving the small aircraft sideways with each gust off the propeller's disc. 200. The fuel warning flashed on the operator's console, empty in 30 seconds. There was no second pass. There was no flight home. The fuel remaining covered the approach and maybe 10 seconds of powered flight after that, which meant the drone was hitting the helicopter or hitting the ground. Either way, it wasn't coming back. Final correction. 2 degrees right onto fuselage center mass. The operator's hands were steady. The algorithm handled the rest, compensating for the quarter-second gap between what he saw and where the drone actually was. 100 meters. The twin rotor discs filled the frame. The entire screen was helicopter rotor blur and fuselage and the dark rectangle of the open door. 70. The latency meant the drone was closer than the image showed. 50 on the feed, maybe 30 in reality. Direct hit, confirmed by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. 24 drones made Russia believe they'd won. The 25th proved the real fight hadn't started yet. Bye for now.